coronal translation, buccal neck rotation, distal neck rotation, distal flare rotation. Or you can move an individual tooth and mirror adjustments of its complementary
Okay. So once again, back to her case, the maxillary BTI. You can either take a wash impression, or if it fits well, which this one did, I didn't take a new wash impression. I simply sit it back in and had the new bite registration scanned and re-articulated on the computer. But if you felt like if you had altered any of the interior of the BTI, then you would take up a wash impression and have that scanned. Then once I approved the preview from that step, then this gets milled, sent back to me, and I picked up those attachments. What you have on the top row are the studded attachments. Those are for use if the implants are less than 10 degrees in divergence. The bottom row is when the implants are greater than 10 degrees. From left to right on the lower, from left to right on the lower is from high retention to low retention. Same thing on the top. About 5 pounds for a clear attachment, about 3 or 4 for a pink, and about 2 for a blue attachment. Now, something kind of funky happened with Zest Anchors, which is the company that makes locators. They went through a phase, and they probably won't ever admit it, but something happened in manufacturing, and those quality controls on those attachments weren't as good as they once were. I could pick up one red attachment, put it on a locator or abutment, and pop it off and feel a certain amount of retention. And pick up another one out of the same package and pop it off and on and feel a different level of retention. I think they've solved that problem. At least they say they have, and I believe they have. But it is frustrating. So sometimes you'll put in some new attachments, and the patient will say, well, this is looser than it was before. And that's a reason for that. The other reason may be that the locator abutment itself is getting so worn that nothing is going to hold it in place, and you have to replace the abutment. So quality control has a lot to do with how well retentive those attachments stay in place. Again, extended ranges, non-studded ones are for implant abutments that are greater than 10 degrees in divergence. There's our patient, upper and lower. Aesthetically, she's fine, but I will tell you that the aesthetics of the acrylic and the teeth have gotten better and better over the last couple of years. The patient also has a digital file on record now. So if she lost her denture or ran over it or the dog ate it, we can push a button and in 3 days we have a new one. We don't have to go back through all of that work. Now, 4 or 5 years later, things will have changed. I'm not counting on being able to push a button and have one that fits exactly correctly at that point. This is a friend of mine, Tom Balsh, in Philadelphia, did this little video. He took his SUV and ran over an adamant denture. So, yes, they're strong. We've thrown them up against the wall and they have to break. But I am not standing here telling you that they cannot break, because they can't. If you get anything thin enough and subject it to enough abuse, yes, it'll break. But I've had far less of that with this. There's your codes for overdentures. For the maxillary, 6110, and for the mandibular, 6111. So when we code those out and charge them out, the total fee is broken into a fee for the overdenture and then separate line item fees for each locator abutment. And not that you should use my fees, but my fee per locator abutment is about $5.50. And then the rest of the total fee is made up in the overdenture itself. If you use a bar, of course, you've got a connecting bar code as well. This is an example of Honegum on the right and a competitor on the left. Look at the running property of the one on the left. Honegum just tends to stay in place. So I don't have nearly as much gagging and palatal issues with that material. Okay, we'll look at how to fabricate a duplicate, but let me stop here again. Any questions so far? I need to pay attention to time as well.
You're going to go through the GTX or GTI.
Oh, RTX. Yeah, yeah. I will. I'll get to that, but it'll be a little while. Yeah. The question is on this new. There is a new attachment system from Zest Anchors. Came out about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. And it was supposed to be the answer to wear on the locator abutments and the retention issues. And it was a dismal failure. It wore just as much, and actually the retention was poorer than the standard locator overdenture. Supposedly Zest Anchors has fixed that. I attended a program with them a couple of weeks ago, and it looks like the new attachment system is better, but I can't swear to it yet because I haven't done it. You have a comment?
Yeah, so what do you send for the scanning, you send it to your lab, and then they send it to Evident, or it's the same thing?
Yeah, you basically have a lab partner who purchases all of the Evident software. So the lab partner will scan and also design the setup on the computer monitor. But there is some interaction between the lab partner and Evident in getting the preview constructed so that it comes back to me. And then, but all of my interactions are with my lab partner. And then once I approve the final preview, the lab partner sends that digital STL file to Evident, and they mill the denture or overdenture, or all in full.
So you get it from Evident?
Yes. Yeah. But you work through a lab. You don't go directly to Evident, like you did when you were working for them.
So have you ever put a metal mesh framework in these?
Yes, I do, and I'm still trying to just, I like metal frameworks. You know, that's my comfort zone. But what I've experimented with, some cases, and not put them in, and I haven't had any breakage. But in the maxillary arch, I still like a metal framework, particularly if I think I'm going to have to make the acrylic a little thinner than I would otherwise. Also in the mandibular, if you're in the symphysis area, if that portion of the denture looks like it's going to be fairly narrow, buccal-lingual, I like a little metal framework in there. So it's a subjective decision, case by case on my part. You'll spend a little more with Evident. The actual milling of a denture is $300. So I'm going to guesstimate in an overdenture case, you probably spend a couple $100 more by the time it's all said and done. The BTI cost about $200. So when you add all that together, you probably got a $500 fee from Evident. Your lab partner will add something to that. So I'm going to guesstimate $600-ish, or depending on how the lab charges it out, how much you're going to get charged. And $600 is a fairly standard fee for dentures in the United States, but you can certainly find them for less than that, and you can certainly find them for more than that. The all-in-four will cost you a little bit more also. There's a pretty wide range of labs right now for all-in-four cases. And we'll look at that, I hope. Okay, let's make a duplicate denture. And yes, that could be delegated to a trained auxiliary. And, you know, I find that auxiliaries find this kind of thing kind of fun. It also gives them something that, a little feather in their cap, you know, maybe they get a bonus, maybe they get a salary increase, once they're able to do that on a regular basis. So, first thing we're going to do is mix 9 scoops of alginate. Let's see here, that's the roll. Okay, 9 scoops of alginate, and I'm going to use just about all of it. And I'm just pretty much going to fill one side of the line duplicator. The denture will go in teeth down into the alginate. Once that's set, I'm going to lubricate the alginate and the interior or the intaglia of the denture. You can spray it or use Vaseline. Lubricate the other side of the line duplicator. Mix another 9 scoops. Alginate in the intaglia of the denture. So we'll wipe some alginate down into the denture. Use all the alginate. Close the 2 halves of the line duplicator together. Screw down the retaining lock screw. We'll have some excess to simply wipe away. And then let that set. All right. Now we will separate the line duplicator flask, and we now have the denture still contained in 1/2, but an impression of the intaglia of the denture in the other half. So we will lift the denture out of the alginate, and we now have an impression of the exterior and the interior of the denture. So I'm going to take some jet acrylic, place some monomer down into the teeth portion first, and then it's just salt and pepper or spray some powder into it, and continue adding liquid and powder until we pretty much fill up the teeth portion. Now, if your lab's making a true duplicate that the patient could wear out, they'll usually let that set, take that section of white acrylic out, trim it at the cervical region, and then put it back into the form. I'm going to not do that. I'm going to leave it in there and just go right on with some more pink acrylic. All cold cure jet acrylic. mix up, you want to mix plenty of it. As you can see here, I didn't mix enough, so I had to go back and mix a little bit more so I could add it to the ridge form here. Then we'll close the flask back up. Let me show that remainder of that into the imprint. And I will close the two halves together. Tighten the locking screw. Then place that in a pressure pot for about 20 minutes. Doesn't have to be hot water, just room temperature water is okay. And then place the lid in position. And so, as you can see, I've overextended the white portion, but here again, for our purpose, it really doesn't matter. Then we're going to trim off all the excess, trim off any nodules, and polish it. So here we have the completed duplicate denture. It's been trimmed, polished. So it's ready to go in for first a bite registration, or establish that you're vertical with it. Once you get that, establish your bite registration and then your wash impression. So I can make that, you know, I can make that, or the assistant can probably do that start to finish in less than an hour, or working through the day, you know, I may go in the lab between patients and do the various steps. The line duplicator will probably cost you about $200, I think, but you can use it forever. Okay. So let's look at one other item. As I said, part of your experience will be how to pick up these metal housings and attachments, and we'll do it on a model-based form. So this is the top of the metal housing, that's the interior, and they come to you from Zest Anchors with black processing attachments inside of them. You also buy the white gaskets with them. So the little vial contains a metal housing, the black attachment, white gasket, and 3 other attachments. Now I'm going to use a light cured material to pick these up. You can use self-curing acrylics. Zest Anchors makes a pickup material as well. This particular pickup material is made by Stern Gold, the same people that make the ERA attachments and implants. So the first thing we're going to do is pop on our little metal housing. Then we'll lasso our little white gaskets around the metal housing slightly below them. You want to make sure you get it below the metal housing so the retentive undercut of the housing is exposed. In order to pick this up, or to attach the pickup material to a denture, this material is not, doesn't adhere to methacrylate, so you use a bonding agent. So Stern Gold supplies this Vantage varnish, which is a bonding agent. I'm going to put that in a dampened dish and then just paint it into the receptacles. Paint it only where you want to pick up the housing. Don't let it get exposed out to the integrity of the rest of the denture. Because wherever you cure this bonding agent, your pickup material will stick. light cure that for 20 seconds or so. Now we're picking up attachments in this patient's trying, so the BTI. So these blue dots are painted, whether it's a pink acrylic or a BTI. I have looked down inside the denture and identified laterally and lingually where the attachment's going to be picked up. Because when you go in the mouth, obviously you lose that orientation. So I'll use that as my guide for where to cure
That closed
through the acrylic.
and closed. Good.
She's got a BTI on the upper and the lower in this case. So we cure through those BTIs, and then when we pull this out, we'll have the metal housing and the black attachment, which I have now changed to a red attachment. Back up there for a moment. So I will cure for about 30 seconds to a minute from the buccal, then have the patient open 30 seconds to a minute from the lingual. If you've got an assistant, then she's curing one side, I'm curing the other. I like to have at least 2 curing lights because those portable curing lights, my tips get really hot. So after about a minute, I've got to switch curing lights so that I don't burn the patient's cheek or tongue. And there's just a little schematic of charges that the patients typically incurs for a locator. If we make a surgical stent, it could cost them a lot more than that, but that's just a ballpark. I may have to do some soft denture relines, about $300 per reline. So our overdenture charges out at $4,500, and then each locator abutment is charged out at $550 each. Okay. We'll do one more and then we'll take a good break. I'm not a fan, excuse me, I'm not a big fan of the 2 implant overdenture. And I spend a lot of time with patients who insist that that's all they can afford. That's that disclaimer. I want to make sure they understand that there is a compromise. I have to do 2 implant overdentures for financial reasons in many cases. But you will always have some lift off in the posterior part of that mandibular denture. And I would advise you to never do a 2 implant maxillary overdenture. I always said I'd never do it, and a couple of years ago I did it and still regret it. But just make sure the patient understands they will have a fulcrum around which that overdenture can rotate. So this patient is going to be a 2 implant overdenture. Fortunately, not on those 2 though. This is the way she presented to our office. She had had 3 implants placed originally, lost one after an overdenture was made, couldn't wear the overdenture, presented to our office with this situation. Severely resorbed bridge. She's not that old. She's 40-something. And wants to know, can I build her an overdenture that would stay in better? And the answer is no, not in this. Tissue's very, very tender. That's where other overdenture or other implant came out. She's in a conventional upper denture. So everything's wrong about the case. As you could see from the radiograph, severely resorbed. So I went ahead and sent her to my oral surgeon, and we just determined that we probably at best could put in 2 different implants, take these 2 out, put 2 more in. If we were lucky enough to get a 3rd one in, that would be great, but we're not counting on it. So I gave her the treatment plan to do that, remove the 2 implants, put in 2 more, make a new overdenture. I asked her to let me make her a new upper denture, and she said, nope, can't afford it. Matter of fact, I can't afford any of that. So she left, but came back about a year later. And at that point said, okay, I've saved my money, I'm ready to go, I want to do this lower case. Still can't, I don't want to do the upper, just the lower. So compromises all around. And actually, I was kind of glad the first time she said, no, I can't afford it, because I really thought this is going to be so hard. It's never going to work. So when she came back in, I was a little disappointed. Are you sure? Sure you want to do this? I was kind of thinking about upping the fee some more, but anyway, we decided to go. She's a sweet little lady. However, she's also one of the most, she's not one of the most. She is the most phobic dental patient I've ever had. The most. You know, cries all the time. Have to give her Valium just to get her in the chair. Have to give her Valium just to unscrew a healing abutment. It's, you know, an hour and a half. What would be a half-hour appointment most of the time is an hour and a half. And lots of drama. So here's what we got. So my surgeon put in 2 Nobel active implants. They're only 8 millimeters in length, and they're only 3.5 millimeters in diameter. So quite a bit of compromise over what I mentioned to you earlier today. So it was done with the traditional workflow up until the final step in which we set our setup to Avadent and had that milled. So here's our working model, 2 implants. Lots of inter-arch space is available here. There's your fulcrum line. So that's the point that I have to really spend some time with the patient, making them grasp the compromise of only 2 implants. And I certainly understand that's all we're going to get in there anyway. But she will have liftoff in this posterior area when she eats, particularly with certain types of foods. You just got to understand that. These are important measurements in my opinion. So for a locator attachment only overdenture per arch, I want 9 to 12 millimeters per arch, inter-arch space. For a bar overdenture and an all-on-4, I want 16 to 18. So a significantly greater amount of inter-arch space is needed for an all-on-4 versus a standard overdenture. And in some cases, we have to pay attention to that. If we're taking teeth out, we have to pay a lot of attention to that and gauge where the residual ridge would wind up if we remove no alveolus and simply take the teeth out. Because in some cases, there is not enough inter-arch space when we do that. We wind up with an inadequate thickness of denture or a severely open vertical dimension. So we've got locator abutments connected into her implants at this point. We get a wax try-in after a bite registration. And we will put our attachments into the base plate so we can preview how much retention we're going to have. And then we send it to Avadent for the final fully milled overdenture. And again, if you'll take a look at acrylic's fine there, but in subsequent cases, it looks 1,000% better today. They've learned to colorize that acrylic and make it look much more lifelike. There's a little bit of translucency in here, not a whole lot, but plenty for most of my patients to accept. And I'm going to pick up those attachments intraorally. That probably was an hour and a half appointment, getting that done. Just was tough to get into her mouth. So we've used green extended range locator attachments. Those are the tightest, the greatest retention level for the extended range. And here she is putting her denture in. Occluding against her existing upper denture, and then taking it out.
Okay.
So it was a success. But again, just remember, 2 implant overdentures are a really tough animal for you, and you will want to spend a lot of time talking to the patient, disclaiming what they can and cannot expect. Okay, how about a break? Then we'll come back and start looking at small and 4s.
That's kind of how I've got one bothering me. Mine are like horizontal impact, and one's they all. I should have gotten them out. You know, it feels like this is something that's in there, you know, like, so I'm trying to stay away from all that.
I'm so scared to walk through that.
Oh, really? And then we did the stormy drive. With no cell phone I'll have to spend a month since no way I can do it. So the tires only